Sarah Toff, can I have your attention, please? How was lunch? How was lunch? Yes? Well done, well done. Lunch was good. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll forward to, in my mind, this is the up and out chapter. Yeah, at the end of Willy Wonka. Yeah, where they press the up and out button. I know! I genuinely am intending for us to smash through the ceiling in the next session. So I hope you've had your wheat of it. So what we're going to try to do is talk about how we can take all these good, juicy, wholesome conversations and amplify them. So, of course, in the last hour, my brain's been digesting all of those gorgeous insights that we've all shared. And have you all been enjoying the same experience? So lots and lots of insights have come together today, and lots of aha moments, which we love, right, Helen Osman? We love an aha moment. But what happens when the aha moments happen with the adults is more children benefit. So when I left the classroom and decided to be a school leader, that's what that was about. I wanted a bigger ripple effect. And so my goal is that this conversation is going to support outcomes for your tutors, which will support outcomes for your students. Probably will repeat that. But first, I'm going to tell you another story. So when I was 43 years old, which was about 6 weeks ago, hello, welcome. So nice to see you. You're very welcome. So when I was about 43 years old, which was about 6 weeks ago, I did an evaluation and assessment with some very sensible, helpful people to evaluate myself for ADHD. And the reason why I did that was because I sort of felt like I'd broken my brain. I felt like I got right to the end of what I know how to do, and I'd run out of tools. We're talking about bringing our whole selves to the table today. So I felt that I'd run out of tools, but I still felt like I wanted to give more, and I started looking for explanations. And one I came up with yeah, really, you fit into all the categories, thank you very much. Yeah, no, it's fine. When I found that, yes, I did fit into all the categories, I started dialing back, and I started to think about myself as a student. And some of you here I know really well, and I have a picture of you I really do have a picture of you as a student. I do also have a photo of you as a student, and I think that there's really interesting elements of neurodiversity that is coming up in recent years. Very frequently in session 4 of qualified tutor training, when we talk about special educational needs, barriers for learning, and mental health, somebody in the group discloses that they were diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. Very frequently. And it's happening more and more. And what's fascinating about that is that it tends to be women, and they tend to talk about masking. So I was a very good girl. So was Georgina Green. We were very good girls in school. We didn't answer back. We pretty much did what was expected of us. We kept our heads down, and we got right through it. Well, it didn't make any sense. I have a 15-year-old who's at home at the moment. Hasn't been to school for 10 days. And he's gorgeous. And he says, I don't see the point. Adrian has a teenager close to him who says, I don't see the point. My 13-year-old daughter said to me just last night, I don't see the point. So we're in every classroom, adults and children, who are not thriving. We don't see the point, We can't cope with what you're asking us to do. We cannot cope with jostling shoulders and elbows with the people next to us, in front of us and behind us, because we're reading everybody's feelings at the same time, and it's blooming exhausting. It's exhausting. I can't learn in that environment. I can learn and I can go to school. I just can't do both things together. I believe that those sensitive ones of us who cannot cope in the classroom, children and adults, are the canaries. The canaries that the coal miners used to take down to check the air, to see what was toxic. And the canaries droop, and the adults and the children droop in the classroom. And the teacher can see it, and they don't have the freedom to do enough about it because they've got to turn the page on the curriculum. I've got to keep going. I've got to cover. The teaching assistant can see them, but she cannot reach all of them because there's so much going on in that classroom, so many needs. And who is it that gets ignored? It's the silent middle. It's the silent middle who don't meet any thresholds, who don't demand attention, who don't sparkle at the front of the classroom and grab all the attention. You've got 30 children competing for the attention of 1 or 2 adults. It's too hard. So I would rather be a dove, and so would Sarah Lynn. We left the classroom because we wanted to put our good energy somewhere that would bring hope. And that's what this is about. So yeah, I'm going to stay really, really big, airy, flary, and thoroughly woo-woo. I am. And I'll tell you why. Because when you go back to your offices, you're going to have straight lines, how-tos, direction. But if in this room we get our mindset straight, then some magic can happen. So I invite you to think together about what we can do. And I invite you to think about the difference between an oak tree and bamboo. Okay? A school is like an oak tree. It takes a long time to build up, a long time to redirect. It's sturdy, it's a monolith. It'll stay there forever, whether you like it or not, whether it's undermining the foundations of the house next door, the oak tree will stand there. Bamboo takes moments to grow, springs up everywhere, is impossible to beat down once it gets going. And I'll tell you something stunning about bamboo. It rehabilitates the land it's growing on. Geographer. You'll tell me if I'm right later. What I know to be true is that school is a great big monolithic, one way is right oak tree. And tutors are like grasses, we're like bamboo. We can spring up anywhere, we can grow quickly, we can respond quickly, and we can go to where the student is. It is a much more agile model. But the other gorgeous thing about bamboo is the way that it works together. And that's what I really want to look at today. So I borrowed the phrase collective tutor efficacy, bless you, from John Hattie. John Hattie's study is the biggest meta-study of evidence in education. I think it's 80 million children that it's recognizing data from. It's a huge study. And what John Hattie has done, that he's since rethought, but he created rankings. He created a list of what's the most effective input for students, how a school can get the most bang for their buck, what to spend their money on, what to spend their time on. And initially, and you'll have seen it from the EEF Teaching and Learning Toolkit, feedback is up there, metacognition is up there, tutoring is up there. But there's something that's just gone to the top recently, and that is collective teacher efficacy. Collective teacher efficacy, where we're saying, if I know that I can make a difference as a teacher in the classroom, let's say, as a professional, and I know that my colleague down the corridor can make a difference, and I join my work up with them, then as a school, we can improve more outcomes for more students, because we believe that we have the skills and the students have the ability to move forward. Imagine taking that out of the four walls of a school. Imagine taking it to your tutoring company and your tutoring company and your tutoring company and your tutoring company, and joining up what good looks like in all of them, but with an agile enough vision that you can adapt it in your own space, in your own way of working, and to suit the well-being of your tutors. So rather than saying, I work in a silo, I work differently, don't look at me, I think I've cracked it, we're saying, imagine if the medical profession behaved like that. Imagine if one doctor cracked a cure for something and didn't share it with other doctors. That would be deeply irresponsible. So too with tutors. We are out there on the front lines working closely with students. What we need to do is help each other to do our best work. So my question to you is, how do you enable your tutors to raise standards? Come on, say it with me. Together with each other, together with other agencies, together. You all know Ludo. When I first met Ludo, he was working in an agency where there was a handover. It was a student in China, was working with 3 different tutors in the week just because of timetabling, and there was no handover because the tutors weren't allowed to talk to each other. Yeah, these things happen. These silos are coming from all sorts of misconceptions and senses of what's the scarcity. We're looking for abundance. Okay, so you've got 15 minutes to talk about raising standards. Off you go. So, the truth is, I'm rusty. I'm taking all the teacher tools out of the box and seeing which ones still work. So, I know my customers, Lucy. So, I've taken some notes as I've been going around, and Johnny, I want to call on you first, but don't swear. Go on.
That's all right.
Thanks, Tia.
A school in West London, Bishopsgate, which is quite near Heathrow Airport, and the head there said that the best thing for him about the tuition was that the pupils felt, like it's written there, someone cares.
Yeah.
Someone actually is invested in them and wants them to do well. Yeah, you met him the other evening, Liam.
Oh, lovely.
And yeah, I think that someone taking an interest is really important. I don't know how that relates to the question.
It does, and I tell you why, and why I pulled on it first was because together doesn't just mean in between tutors, and it doesn't mean just in between agencies. Lots and lots of people have been talking about the relationship between teachers and tutors. And it's difficult, not only because of stigma, but also because of practicalities. We've seen that the NTP has created so much administrative burden, and navigating through that so that the actual practitioners can actually talk about the actual student. You know, you have to get through layers before you can do that. So these relationships, as we're raising standards together, are complex, nuanced, and important. Kimberly on Zoom asked, did it used to be easier? She said, how come we used to be able to cope and now we can't? Any thoughts? I've got lots of thoughts. I know, go on. Would you mind reading the?
Yeah, it was in reference to just coping as a child, you know, just managing the situation.
Right, on the run. Oh.
Yeah, so the reference was about, you know, children coping, you know, 15, 20 years ago, but not being able to cope in quite the same way now.
It's just too easy. Lucy, Kirsten, Helen, go.
Wait, Mike. So I'm going to put my eTeach hat on here, which is obviously teacher recruitment. And I think that right now, one of the massive things that is directly impacting our learners in every educational setting is the teacher recruitment and retention crisis. I know it's not tutoring per se, but it's so interlinked that it's almost difficult to sit here and only talk about tutoring and school and this, so I think, did it used to be easier? I don't really know if there's a yes or no answer, but I think it is incredibly difficult for all the amazing educators that are existing in the mainstream setting right now to do the job that realistically they were brought on to do, because there's so many different challenges in terms of, okay, like we were talking about earlier about just filling a job, you just need someone to be there. And I think there is a lot of that at the moment. Is it the educator's fault? Absolutely not. Is it the school's fault? Absolutely not. Is it because they've all had to turn to trusts? Absolutely not. It's because the system is fundamentally causing so many, there's like a myriad of different issues that are causing, like, teaching's not cool, is it? Like, you don't look at I remember going into teaching and thinking, I want to change the world, I want to do this. And so many of us did that. And actually now it's like, no, I don't want mental health issues. No, I don't want a toxic head teacher telling me I have to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to jump out of this and I'm going to do something else. And I know that's quite, not necessarily the most, like, I don't know, fair thing to say, but we were talking earlier about some of the teaching Facebook groups and things, seeing the level of depression, seeing the level of just absolutely reaching rock bottom. And that, like, because I'm really far away from that now, because my journey in tutoring started 7 years ago, and that's when I hit rock bottom in teaching. But it all comes down to, we're really in a bad place with teacher retention in schools. And I think, in answer to the question, did it used to be easier? Yes, probably, because I do believe that that is probably the biggest issue in the education system right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Kirsten, go ahead.
Well, I do think that tutoring has the potential to make education sexy, a place where we can really innovate and work for ourselves and define our own careers. And so to that point, Lucy, I think there is potential for that here. I think maybe it feels harder now because there's more choice, and maybe that's a good thing, that when there are alternatives, parents want to demand more for their kids and have that right to access alternatives that will suit their kids, because the mainstream isn't working for their children. That said, Johnny and I were having a conversation about parenting, and both got 3 kids, but at different ages. And I think there is a thing called, like, parenting, or maybe teaching amnesia, that it was better in the good old days. I think, oh, it was so nice when they were that age. So I think we need to be
It's okay, because
be
Helen will
aware of
always
that as
remind
well.
you it's not true.
So yeah, combination of, yeah, it's always better in the before, because we forget how hard it always was. But alternatives are a good thing, I think.
Helen.
I think it's different. Not so much harder, it's different. I mean, for children, I think you said it earlier about, is it worth going to school, or what's the point? The thing is, if they want to know something, they can Google it. And they just Google stuff, and what's the point in standing in front of a teacher if they can just go on their phones and Google it? So, and I think social media, I think it's much harder. I think lockdown had, and the pandemic had a massive impact on children, and seeing something different and seeing a different way of life. and, you know, they could have their tuition, go out and play and go over with their families and go to the park. They want that back again, you know, and I think that that's made life very different for a lot of people, and it's caused a lot of mental health. So I think we're seeing so many more children with mental health issues, and a lot of it started during lockdown, and the idea of having to go back to an establishment which doesn't work for them, because if they want to find out something, it's just at their fingertips. So it's
Julian,
different.
do you mind if I call on you next? Am I right? So Julian came to me in the break. Would you speak?
Sure.
Go ahead.
I mean, I don't have one over here.
Oh,
Yeah.
pass it over.
Okay.
That was Julian speak for yes.
So what I was going to say was, I've been using AI for about the last month or so, various different projects, various different writing things. And I agree with the speaker before who said that I think the government and the school will kind of, look to ban it. And, really, again, this is in my opinion, but education should be looking to integrate it into teaching. So I had an exercise with my son about writing an application for a college, and I used AI to just start the conversation about how to answer a question. Write 500 words on something, on why you'd be good. And he pointed out very clearly, look, the English isn't great. You can't use that English because it's as good as it is. It looks good, but it isn't good English. And again, so from my point of view, as a father, let's say, tutoring education should be about taking that and making it better, like teaching the student how to use it, write better, and integrate it into society rather than to ban it.
Thank you so much, Julian. So it's almost like we're saying how to use AI should go onto the curriculum, and that would answer the question, what's the point? And it would teach us to ask maths questions that Alexa can't answer. And all of these things are the kids saying to us, curriculum's not fit for purpose. What's the point? We're raising standards together. Just remember that. Go ahead. Who put their hand up? Helen?
I did.
Great.
But I wasn't sure if I was next.
Yes, go ahead.
Your list's not up anymore, Julia.
Lucy's next.
Is there an element, do you think, of always being on now that we didn't have 20 years ago? We are always on. Kids are on social media legally from, or whatever the terms and conditions is, from 13, a sort of thing that the US Surgeon General said that's too young to be on. They're on social media. They are seeing things. They are tuned to the news. Not that we want to hide them from the world, but at the same time, they are still developing as people. They take on so much. And these days it is so much more because they have Professor Google, they have AI, there's all sorts of places that they're getting their information that they, at least, thinking about 20 years, I was a teenager. We barely had computers in classrooms at that point. I wouldn't necessarily know where to go. I had to go to a book encyclopedia if I wanted to learn something, or a teacher or a tutor. I didn't have a phone. Wasn't always on. Even now as teachers, parents can email at the middle of the night. You're working till 10, you've still got your emails are on your work phone. You can't put it down. Sarah Lynn's well-being driving into my brain now. Helen, turn off the computer at 9 o'clock at night. Stop work, give yourself a break. Kids don't have the control for that. They don't have the discipline yet. We need to teach them that discipline. Maybe that's what should be on the curriculum, as opposed to, I'm getting some hands up over there. You probably can't see it on the camera for those at home.
And I'll give you another one as well, whilst we're on the subject. Andrew, you'll speak to this. Critical thinking. So evaluating sources. So many sources out there. That's what we should be teaching them. I feel that we're slightly off topic.
That doesn't surprise me.
Just based on what we kind of just talked about there, about one thing I did think it was kind of important to say, because obviously we're here about tutoring and it is really exciting, and it is like the opportunity with tutoring is just vast. But I do think, even so much as the idea of the school being the oak tree and the, you know, fast, so it's like slow and then it's fast. Like one thing that I absolutely am really against is when we talk negatively about school. In terms of the raising standards together, we cannot sit and talk negatively about school. School should not. They have many misconceptions, mainly, as we all know, about the word tutoring. There is loads of misconceptions around the word tutoring. Oh, it's for the rich. Oh, it's like, look, just look at everyone in here. Most people are working with the most disadvantaged and vulnerable young children in the UK. We're not sitting here going, oh yeah, I'm off on a yacht, you know. So I think it's really important that we try and work with the schools to sort of say, rather than slow, fast, oak tree, bamboo, do we need those things? Aren't we all in this together? And I just think that we know what we do well and how we can plug in to this mainstream strand, and then there's a special educational needs strand, and then there's the independent strand, and there's actually an alternative education strand which we really like excel in. But I do think that we should always try and remain like not trying to draw ourselves as like, yeah, the cool, fun, sexy, like tutoring. Like that's not, I don't believe that helpful to education.
Thank you. Helen, go ahead.
As part of that, do we as tutors, tutoring companies, need to clear up some of those misconceptions publicly, social media, wherever we can, working with teachers, working with parents to say, this is what you should expect from a tutor. I was having a conversation with whoever it was that was sat next to me earlier, and the name has eluded me because the paper's gone. Thank you. And I was saying that actually parents will take your word for what qualifications you have. They won't necessarily ask to see. They'll take your word for it. So I could set myself up as the head of math. No, I'm not the head of maths at any big school, but there's no way to check. Parents don't know. Many of them won't know to ask for a DBS, which is the bare minimum we'd say is acceptable. DBS, safeguarding. Parents don't know to say, that's what you need. This is what you need. Do we need to be shouting, well, not shouting, more prominent in speaking about it to parents, online, social media, schools, to clear up some of those misconceptions about what tutoring can do and what you should expect from a tutor?
I think that's fantastically responsible. Thank you so much. Adrian, speak for the people.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so just coming back to the pandemic and the impact that's had, Jane's just mentioned there about that it was a very tough time for the children, and that in many ways what we're trying to do is trying to get back to normal, but normal isn't there anymore. Normal's different for the young people, which is why maybe many of them aren't coping. And then Kimberly mentioned, who posed the question first of all, about, why did we cope as children? Maybe we didn't quite cope, but maybe it appears that more people did cope. And Kimberly came back and said, well, is it because life's just simpler? It's less complex then?
Thank you.
So some good points, echoing what's been said in the room.
Thank you.
One of the things I was going to say to your point, I think the National Tutoring Programme has been quite an interesting experiment when you think about, in some ways that was trying to kind of educate, I think, schools about the power of tutoring and how to use it alongside what they're doing. And I think that speaks to your point really well about there's that partnership element and it's meant to be about all of us working together. I think what that has shown is that it's quite hard, and there's definitely some lessons, I think, from the NTP in terms of how you communicate that. But it is quite a process, and even 3 years in, there's still many schools we speak to and they have somehow still never heard of the National Tutoring Programme, or they don't have a real conception of how it can support what they're doing versus being sort of an attack on, their teachers not doing a good enough job, which is not at all what it is. So I think in that wider education piece, I think reviewing and evaluating the NTP and how it's gone about it would be quite an interesting place to start, because I think it shows it can be challenging. Parents are busy, schools are busy, and an extra thing is always going to be quite hard to take on. And so how you sort of fix that messaging and how you communicate it, I don't think we've quite struck gold there yet. Sometimes it works really well, and sometimes schools really get it, and you see such good results off the back of it. And likewise, I'm sure the same with some parents. You get that really good partnership. But I guess it kind of comes back to that. It doesn't seem we found quite like one model that fits all to make sure it's successful yet.
And isn't that gorgeous? Isn't that gorgeous that we haven't cracked it yet? But we know we haven't cracked it, and we know what we haven't cracked, and we know where we want to take it. And this experiment is up and running and has some legacy behind it and has some data behind it. That's an amazing place that we are together. Yes, Sarah?
So I feel like I can add to that, because at White Rose Maths, we don't tutor via the parent route. We only tutor via the MTP route. So that's all we know. And we've seen over the last couple of years a difference in the schools that we're interacting with. So we've seen this academic year schools being much more proactive, much more engaged with what we're giving information and them receiving it and what they do with it. They're much more proactive in terms of giving us information to start off with, which is a brilliant starting point when we get more of that. But when we've tried to, I'm not saying this is the only reason why, but when we have tried to dig down into why there's been that shift this academic year, I feel honestly it comes from word of mouth from other schools. So like we can put all sorts of marketing things out there, we can do all sorts of emails, we can do all sorts on social media, but if they're hearing from the school down the road that this has had impact on some of their most disadvantaged pupils, that's what they have as their rubber stamp almost. Because I mean, marketing's marketing, you put your best out there, don't you? But from hearing the people on the ground, hearing the pupils go, we love it, we can't wait, oh, we're not having it today, oh. And that's brilliant. And there's some schools that in our local area that joined together in the summer for a sports day. Two of our tutors that worked with a couple of those schools were invited along, and they said that they saw a little clique of people like talking about tuition and the impact of tuition, and then they came to us in September. So I think sometimes like you can put all the glossy stuff out there, but if you can get schools talking together about it, word of mouth is like fantastic for it, isn't it?
Has anybody cracked how to do that?
Sports day.
And if you have patent it, yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Kirsten.
So we haven't cracked it, but we yet. So in August last year, my co-founder Kate Carney and I set up a business called Hybrid School because of the tech stack that we pulled together for Gaia Learning. And what we were finding from most schools where they were saying, well, it's great, your tutors are brilliant, and, you know, good outcomes for the kids, but we want our own online school. We want our own tutors. We want our own brand, our own marketing, our own message to parents. We want you to use our curriculum. And so what we've started to do is build schools for other schools so that they can be involved in recruiting. We do the process, but choosing their own tutors at their own price points. And in order to reduce that mistrust, or to ease the communication, them saying, this is the curriculum, this is the outcome, this is what we want for our school, for our community, it's then helping them to expand their reach in their own local geographies. And I think that's, like, as a geographer, I love the global ambition we have with Gaia Learning, but actually geography it comes down to people and communities and customizing that for the needs of each of them, and maybe that's part of the future.
It's gorgeous, that relationship between the big and the small there. And also there's something about holding on to the school's culture that you wouldn't necessarily get if you moved entirely to a virtual context and totally homeschooled. So really interesting to give that power to a school. You can have a prize for enthusiasm. Go on then, Kirsten.
So as much as we're all in this for those individual good news stories that keep us doing this and engaged in it, ultimately, and I've found this as a business owner, always the bottom line and the big thing for head teachers is it's a finance thing. It's money. It always comes down to the money. And there is a lot of money available to support some of our most vulnerable kids. And those schools can only access it if they can get it in their own purse and deliver it like that. So by creating, their own spaces for their own tutors, it allows that money to go into that space as well and kept for that community and for those kids that need it rather than diluted in other ways. And yeah, I think we have to be realistic when it comes down to the finance plus the bigger mission plus the...
That's completely awesome, and I know there's a few people in this room who are really, really experienced at drawing down those funding, and really interesting to think about keeping the funding in its community that it's intended for. So really, really gorgeous. Is there anything else that we wanted to share remotely?
Not at the moment.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, please, to share what you need next in terms of raising standards in tutoring. Oh, you're getting sleepy. Coffee in the next break, coffee.